Hello, everyone. I'm Bableen, and I welcome you all to today's webinar of DCEJ series presented by the Department of Development Communication, Extension, and Journalism. Stories. Stories form the heart and soul of our interactions. Isn't it amazing how they change the way we think and feel, and how they inspire us much more than just facts? This is the theme of today's webinar. To traverse through the art of storytelling for brands, we have a very special guest with us today, Mrigashree Pant. To give you a glimpse of her journey, Mrigashree has been telling stories through audiovisual medium for the last 7 years. She has been a film director working across long form TV content and short form digital brand videos. She directed India's first travel and magic series across 4 seasons, which got aired on NDTV Good Times nationally and Sony BBC Earth internationally. One of her films for the series Odd Jobs for Times Now got her the ICMA Award for the Best Nonfiction Content. A graduate from English Honours, Miranda House, and a postgraduate in Mass Communication from AJKMCRC, Jamia, she is currently working as a video expert at India's first and largest content marketing place called Scatter. Though she is based out of New Delhi, today she has connected to us directly from Bhimtal, her beautiful hometown in the hills of Uttarakhand. So, without further delay, I think people are eager to listen to you, hear from you, Mrigashree. I welcome you on board, and the space is all yours.
Thank you, Bableen. That was a really sweet introduction there. Hi, everyone. My name is Mrigashree, and right now I'm connecting with you, like Bableen said, from the hills of Uttarakhand. So, if there is first things first, if there's a delay anywhere um, in the network, if there is a lag in this story that we are going to be hearing for the next 1.5 hours, uh, I'd really say just I'd be sorry for that because there are few things not in my control. Um, so let's move to the idea and the thought of storytelling. I think one of the reasons we're all here is that because we love to hear stories or we love to tell stories. What we're majorly going to be covering is storytelling in the format of brands. How does storytelling for brands happen? Why is storytelling for brands important? And how do we work around it? So let's look at the simple idea of why is it important to tell stories. Bableen, I'm not sure if you're really projecting. There is a presentation I have, which I usually, I'm not a very presentation oriented person, but then we just put it together so that, we could make up for the lag of
Sure.
any
Like
information. Yeah, this works. Okay,
the
so what
science.
I'll do is, yeah. So let's talk about why is it important to tell stories, right? I think most of the conversations that we have with our friends, at a very minuscule levels of what things we talk about every day, to things we read, to things we hear, we're always talking stories. People always want to hear stories. Um, One of the reasons, very personally, why I felt that, how storytelling really impacted me was I came from this little town and I was growing up here in the early 90s. And this was the time when we were not even very open to the internet. Perhaps we had just the DD national connection at home. And one of the main things that actually, that made me feel few emotions for the first time, that made me think about things for the first time were just stories. So what we would really do is that in the evenings we'd just sit by the bonfire and just talk about things. And most of those things would be stories. Most of those things would be folk tales or just stories about one another. So story is something that touches every life. Move on to look at the people who are not indulging in the idea of storytelling or the profession of storytelling on an everyday basis. They're still a part of stories. A very simple example of this would be WhatsApp forwards, for that matter. The reason we want to push a story forward to somebody else is because we know this is going to be engaging. So most of the things, and it serves as, so most of the things that we actually push forward are actually because they give you a little bit of respite from the life that you're living every day. It opens you to new possibilities. It shows you there are so many verticals of life that you perhaps didn't know, because there's one life you're living, but storytelling actually gives you this, this white sky to actually go and experience so much more out there. And storytelling, especially when you're talking of fiction content, is something that also works as therapy. If you're an individual, I mean, imagine somebody who's working morning to night, a 12-hour shift, comes back home, goes to this little theater, watches, or just opens his OTT platform, watches a certain story. He's disconnecting himself from his everyday mundane life. He's becoming a part of the struggle and the victory of the hero he's looking at. He's sharing that emotion, he's living a life with that. So that becomes that is what the power of storytelling is. And one very important thing when we come to brand storytelling is stories are forms that build trust. Stories build trust between two entities that do not see each other. It becomes a way of communication to actually be much more than a product. So that's what we are really going to be looking at today. How stories build this trust that we are talking about, how stories communicate for a product that you want to put forward, how stories make a product, how a product actually becomes an integral part of your life through a story. That's essentially what we'll be looking at in the next 1.5 1 hour of what we have to say. So like I said, stories build trust, right? There is one thing that we say when we talk about brand storytelling is that a very good way to actually push forward your story is stop pushing your product. Uh, Focus on why you want to say that story for a brand. Focus, don't sell out what you want to say, sell out an idea, sell what is it that that story is going to be really saying. Because when you tell this story and explain what you stand for, what your values stand for, every brand really stands for something, right? You have Apple standing for innovation, you have somebody like a Surf Excel who's standing for more humanitarian things, celebrating. You have Coca-Cola that's standing for more of happiness factor. So those are the emotions that you give to certain brands. And then how do you start selling the product? Through those emotions, through stories that you weave around those emotions. Because then they become your values. Coca-Cola, I want to buy a Royal Enfield because I feel, that I am this freestyle spirit who is this, who wants to set onto an adventure, right? But has Royal Enfield given me that feeling, or has the marketing or the storytelling around that given me that feeling? So I almost become this tribe, right? Which is one with the value of somebody like a Royal Enfield. So what you need to essentially do when you're telling stories through brands is that you need to find that value in that brand, right? What is that value? Am I talking about innovation? Am I talking about togetherness? Am I talking about celebration of everyday life? Am I talking of protection? Just find that, and find the people who share that value, and then put your idea, put your story forward. What that does is it creates a trust which you can't ask a customer to give you. It is something that you'll have to build, that you'll have to grow. And because stories become one of the ways, the ad films you're making or the digital films you're making or whatever communication that you're doing around the brand becomes a way to actually for your product to speak to the customer. That story becomes one of the main instruments that gets you loyalty from a customer because of the value that you've shared. Because I have gone forward and said that Royal Enfield is about adventure, it's about discovering yourself possibly on a mountaintop. All the riders out there will be hearing me and talk and will be like, oh yeah, this is me. This is being said to me. If an Ariel talks about, they have a campaign that's come in very recently. I mean, it's been, I think, almost a year. They came up with Share the Load. uh, Share the Load is if you remember, if anyone has seen that campaign, woman who has been washing clothes, she doesn't get enough sleep, and she's been washing clothes right from early morning, and then this chores don't end at all, and then it brings in the idea of share the load. uh, so it suddenly clicks with people there. It suddenly clicks with all the women who are in the house who are wanting that, yes, help should come my way. My family member should be helping me cleaning or possibly doing the chores. So that is what. And then you suddenly, then detergent just comes in the background. What's that woman who's seen that brand story there? will remember is, yes, Ariel talks about women like me. This is my product. I need to pick this up. So that's how you build more on the values of your brands. When you build a story on the value, a certain emotion, because a viewer is not going to remember the product. There are 100 products, and the viewer has, your customer has the power to actually go out and pick up what he likes. He's going to a mart, there is a Surf Excel, there is an Ariel, there are four other things, there is a Tide. He will pick what he wants. But if he has that recall value through the story that you have said, which makes him remember that Ariel ad made me feel was my story. I could relate to what that was saying. It is talking to people like me. That is when you have clicked the right audience. That is when you have become more than a product and become actually an emotion that is out there in the mind and heart of your customer, so that they remember you when they're out there to make a purchase. That is how you create loyalty. So what storytelling essentially for brands does is it creates the loyalty through the value that you give forward. Because if you remember the ads in the early 90s, when, because after digital media has come in, brand storytelling has actually completely revamped itself. Earlier, we used to have 30-second slots in televisions, and you had to quickly tell your story, right? This is Ghari detergent, this is what I have to sell, or you talk about Fena Helena, or you talk about any of the ads that you remember from the early 90s. They were just talking about, this is the product, this is what it does, buy it. This was a simple story that you had to say. Now, that is something that we're not doing at all. Because obviously, one of the reasons is there is so much to consume. There are so many brands, and every brand has a story to tell. So we'll come to how actually construct stories around that. So, like I said, now your values, the value that you push forward becomes something that makes your customers stay loyal. I'll give you an example of that. Uh, just last month, okay, and we're going to be looking at some popular examples or some recent examples that we have. When you're talking about values and how you create this loyalty, just last month it was Mother's Day, and very, very honestly, like the film industry has been really taken a hit because, the ad industry too, because nobody's really going out for shoots, and uh, people like us have challenges to actually come up with new kind of formats that should be working in this space when we're so restricted in terms of taking cameras out or shooting. And this is a very interesting example. This is something that Axis Bank came up with for Mother's Day, and the idea of stop pushing your brand but push an idea. So Bubbling, there is this little link of 4 tips to keep passwords safe. If you could just play that on the second slide. Yeah, this one. So this typical idea, a lot of us are very careless with passwords. It just picks, and especially the mothers, a lot of us are now moving into net banking accounts, etc. So it just takes up that insight and builds over that. I don't know if you guys can hear the audio. I can't.
1 minute. So, yeah, playing it.
अपने बच्चों के नाम से माँ करती है थोड़ा एक्स्ट्रा ही प्यार। जब पति को बुलाना हो, अजी सुनते हो नेहा के पापा, या खुद को करना हो इंट्रोड्यूस, बेटा पहचाना, मैं पिंटू की मम्मी। नाम तो बच्चों का ही होता है, खुद मंदिर जाती है, मगर पूजा बच्चों के नाम से ही कराती। Moms just love their बच्चों का नाम, but when they use it as their bank password, फ्रॉड करने वालों को पासवर्ड गेस करना हो जाता है बहुत आसान। तो चलो एक नया और स्ट्रॉन्गर पासवर्ड बनाने में माँ की मदद करें, और इस काम में आपकी मदद करने के लिए हम हैं ऑलवेज ओपन।
Yeah, right. So now, if you look at this ad, the first thing that they're catching on is not Axis Bank, is not Go Bank. It's what a mother does. The insight is something. We'll come to what insights are, but they actually pick on something that is, that you'll relate. Oh, my mom also does this. This is very relatable. Yes, I've seen my mother's password is also my name and my date of birth. So that is what they've picked on, so that it suddenly clicks you and say, hey, this is my mom, or I've seen mothers like this. And then they build the idea of, they're again not saying that go bank with Axis Bank. What they're saying is that, hey, when you're making your passwords, you're putting in names that could be not as safe for your account. Your passwords are the names of your kids or whatsoever, could not be safe for your accounts. And then once they've given a message, once they've delivered a value, now you know that Axis Bank is somebody who takes care of how secure I am with my account. It is looking at if I am playing safe when I'm going forward for net banking, because mothers lately, I mean, they're also playing on the insight of now a lot of accounts are actually moving to being online accounts because contactless transactions, etc. And their mothers are setting up this kind of a password. So they play on the idea of what is the value, what is that emotional approach to it. And then they say that, then they bring in Axis Bank in the end. So you will, even if you forget if Axis Bank is what they were talking about, you'll remember, oh, there was something that they said which was about passwords. And then when you finally get into it, you remember Axis Bank through the story that they told you. So that's the power that storytelling has. That's the power that you can weave into the stories which you, even if you want to bring in a brand, they can still be as human. They can still be as relatable. So let's take a quick look at what is storytelling for brands, right? Now, if I have to, probably we can move to the next slide. Now, let's take I'll give you a simple definition for it. Like, a brand storytelling is when you use a narrative to connect your brand to customers with a focus on linking what you stand for to the values you share with your customer. Now, there are three very key words here. We're talking about narrative, we're talking about what you stand for, and we're talking about values, right? So let's move on to the next slide. So when we're talking narrative, right? Remember this. We're talking narrative, what you stand for, and values. When you're saying that storytelling is using a narrative to connect your brand, when you're talking narrative, you're talking about storytelling elements. Your narrative is, let's say, the Axis Bank one, which we just saw. The narrative is, the whole story about the mother. The narrative.
I think due to low bandwidth, the video has gone. So we can play a video that Mrigashree was mentioning meanwhile, by the time the speaker joins us again. Mrigashree, are with us again?
Yeah. I'm back. Sorry, I think there was some network issue from here. Okay, fine. Yeah. So just let's come back to that slide. I'll quickly move to what you are looking at. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So what you stand for, right? I don't know until where you heard me, but what I was, because I realized it too late that this wasn't working. Yeah. So what we're saying is that, when you think of a Nike versus when you think of a Woodland, the moment I take the names of these brands, you have a certain imagery associated with them, and it's very diverse. Now, what is the reason? Both of them also make sports shoes. Both of them also make loafers, right? But why is it that you think of two different things? It's because the essence of these two brands is different. It's about what they say to you and how they want you to perceive them that is different, right? And it's the driving force behind what they believe in that is differentiating them from one another. Nike is not something, all the brands stand for a certain kind of spirit. Nike doesn't stand for a sneaker or a sports equipment. It stands for the athletic excellence. It stands for the sports star inside you. Disney, for that matter, doesn't stand for cartoons and parks and movies. It stands for family happiness as a brand. That's the emotion it's giving out to you. So every time you get a brand brief, this is the first thing that you need to ask. What is that brand standing for? What is the value behind? What is the emotion behind? Then, like I said, you have what you stand for to the values you share with your customers, right? The values you shared with your customer. Why do you trust so much on an Apple or a Microsoft? Because the values that they share with you are that of innovation, of invention, of excellence, right? So every brand has a certain connect with you. There is a certain value that they come forward with. And that needs to be a part of your story. The character trait of what you stand for, of what your company defines, the value that you stand for. So these three things together build up your brand narrative. Where you have a narrative, where you're thinking of what my brand stands for, what is the value that it has in the life of my customer. If you've thought of these three things, you're at least fine with the first step of telling your story forward. Now let's talk about what I'm essentially saying. Let's kind of find an example of the same in two very similar brands, right? How do you create a brand voice? How do you look? How do companies like a Pepsi and a Coca-Cola, which are essentially selling one cola only, similar kind of cola, right? They're essentially selling the same product. How is it that you perceive both the brands as very different? While Pepsi, I think we can just skip that now. Bablin was just playing something that Pepsi has just done, which is Swag Se Solo. Earlier, before that, they were doing Har Goot Mein Swag. Those were the brand films that were coming out, right? And Coca-Cola on the other side was doing something like Taste the Feeling. The very fact that Coca-Cola came up with those bottles where you had a friend, a brother, and all of a mother, and all of the things written. Now, a Pepsi, since early 90s or even before that, from the time I've been seeing their television ads, have always spoken about being youthful. They always talk about energy. They always talk about confidence. They talk about all the brand films that they do. They stand for everything that is fashionable and in with society. So right now, when they come up with something like Swag Se Solo, the insight that they're working on is that there is a new trend that we see in the millennials. Millennials right now are preferring to be self-partnered. So they underwent this research where they found that 7 out of 10 men in the age group of 15 to 30 years are single, and the brand decided that this is what we want to work on. This is what we want to build the campaign on. That's why they get somebody like a Salman Khan, who is this icon for singlehood, right? So this is what Pepsi is playing on. Very, very, trends which are new, trends which are in with the youth at a current time. Coca-Cola, on the other hand, talks about uplifting, enhancing your everyday moments. With their campaigns like Open Happiness, with their campaigns like Taste the Feeling, Share a Coke. They're all the time talking about enjoying little relationships, little moments, little happiness in life. So lately, in 2018, they came up with this campaign called Share a Coke. I'm sure all of you must have at least, if not seen the ads, but bought Coke, which had, like I said, best friend, father, all of that written on that. The essential idea that they wanted to build a storyline on that was that relationships in India were becoming informal as time passed, right? We're not as strict with our fathers anymore. The fathers aren't as strict with us. There is a little bit of ease in the relationship. There is a transition that's going, and they wanted to play on that. So they came up with this ad. Bablin, if you could just play Share a Coke. I think there should be a hyperlink there. No, the one before this. Just go on to. No. Just roll up. Yeah, Share a Coke. No, the other side. Under Coca-Cola? Yeah. So here, look at this ad, okay? They've actually looked at this little moment of how a father and a child transition into a happy moment. Yeah. So now if you see, there is a lot of difference in the communication of both the brands, right? Because one is talking completely on an emotional level, talking about relationships, talking about small joys, talking about little happiness, while the other is talking about celebration of youth. It's talking about that energy. Uh, so essentially, when you look at a brand story, your good brand story works when it goes beyond products and services. Um, a very good example of that would be something like a Surf Excel. The moment I say daag achhe hain, you know that I'm talking Surf Excel. What has Surf Excel done? You know, back, and this is what they're playing along with since 2005. Uh, Back in 2005, when all the other brands which were talking about detergent were talking about Ziddi Daag, Surf Excel breaks the mold and comes up with Daag Achhe Hain. It talks about generating empathy. It talks about, hey, stains are good if they're teaching you a value. It's saying that even dirt is clean if it's teaching you humanity. And what they've very interestingly done is they've used very innocent stories. All of their Surf Excel ads, if you see, have children as protagonists in a very simple slice of life situation, looking at how stains are actually being being very instrumental in making them learn something important about humanity. So if that's why, you know, that's why they always keep saying that agar daag se kuch acha hota hai to daag achhe hain. So how you completely, you know, remold a brand that is actually about cleaning clothes into talking about something which is so human, that is where the strength of your story lies. Okay, now I'm going to be taking, you know, I'm going to be showing you some examples now, uh, some of the films that, you know, we had lately done, and kind of tell you as to how we got into making that kind of a narrative, right? So, Bableen, let's move on to the slide number 9. So, it was around 2 years ago. We had a, yeah, we're good here. Around 2 years ago, we had a brief from this brand called Dabur. What they wanted was they had this product called Dabur Red Paste, and they had a product called Dabur Red Paste, and they had an event which was the Kumbh Mela. And what they wanted was that, you know, we are, and they were doing an activation. They were basically putting some stalls at the Kumbh Mela, you know, some of Dabur Red Paste, where people could go get the paste and, you know, brush. There was a vending machine sort of a thing. Now they wanted a whole story around it, because brands, apart from doing the ads that you see and the commercials that you see on television, or the digital films that you see, you know, which are mostly fiction because that's the content that's being shared mostly, are also doing a lot of activation, on ground activities that they want films around. So yeah, so we had this brief. Now the thing was, our challenge at that point was that, you know, at the end of the day, it was Kumbh. 1,000 films get done on Kumbh, right? There are so many people making so many things on Kumbh every year. And on the other hand, you had this mundane activity of just brushing. Um, that is what you needed to build a narrative on, that people who are coming to Kumbh are just brushing, and, you know, what do we do about it? What our first steps to that was that we judge Dabur as a brand, right? You look at what Dabur stands for. Who are the people using these products? Who is Dabur talking to? We realized that Dabur is especially with you know, a segment like a red toothpaste, Dabur Red. They are a brand which is very massy. They are talking to you know, people living in 3-tier towns. Those are the people who are buying this. So that the first thing that did to us was, okay, we need to have a narrative that talks to these guys. We need to have a language that needs to talk to these guys. We need to have a treatment and a format to the video that talks to these people, to this 3-tier mass, 3-tier Hindi speaking mass in states like Uttar Pradesh, in states like Uttarakhand, Madhya Pradesh, and around, wherever these, you know, wherever this brand was more prevalent. Okay, so now then you have to look into what these people like. Um do these people do they listen to more Hindi music? Do they groove to Hindi music more, or do they listen to serious kind of stories, or do they listen to documentary? Uh, is this the kind of content they're watching? We realized that the crowd that we were talking to, which is coming to Kumbh, which is doing Dabur Red Paste, which is the crowd that will actually go all the way to a Dabur Red Paste stall and take the paste from there and brush. Was somebody perhaps who liked just watching, music and songs and perhaps that was the easiest understanding to that person. And then the challenge was, how do you make the mundane activity of brushing teeth interesting? So we framed a narrative. Then, so when we actually judged all of these things, we said, yeah, a song is something that's going to work well in this market because Kumbh is already overdone in the documentary space. A song is something that could bring light. It's a very mundane activity of just brushing, which is just a repetitive thing. It doesn't have much to it. So you needed to bring in some light elements. You needed to bring in some joy. You needed to bring in some fun to this activity of brushing. Everyone is not going there to brush, but to actually bathe and take a dip in the holy water. So you need to tell people that brushing kind of becomes an important activity somewhere around what you're really there for. Um, and you needed to bring in, for people to actually have fun with the video. We needed to think about what are the main things that happen in the Mela? What are the funny things that happen in Mela? What are the things that people experience from kids getting lost to, being pickpocketed, to eating so many things, to basically just all the little things that happen. Combine them, find what is interesting and how that can be a part of the story for your consumer, how that connects to your consumer who's out there using this double egg paste. And then we came up um, with this film. Bablin, I'd like you to play the film.
हेलो चेक चेक नारायण यात्री कृपया ध्यान दें इस पावन नगरी में आपका स्वागत है। सभी श्रद्धालुओं से अनुरोध है, भैया कुंभ स्नान से पहले दंत स्नान प्रारंभ करिए। पाप की गठरी को पुण्य में बदल आस्था की डुबकी में हम चले हैं तरले, करोड़ों यहाँ भीड़ में है चलते, पिछड़े हुए बच्चे रोते हंसते मिलते, मेले में भीड़ मिले संतों से ज्ञान, उससे पहले हो जहाँ पर संत सखा, संत सखा। एक बच्चा चट्टी में है चबा चबा के चिंगम कर इनका भी ये बच्चा है, गेट नंबर 11 से ले जाए, दांत मजबूत बनाए, मुन्ने को डाबर रेड पेस्ट कराएं। कतरे भी हम भोले के भक्त, काम के पक्के पर कानून है सख्त, लाउड स्पीकर से आती आवाजें, अनजान व्यक्ति से करिए ना बातें, मेले में भीड़ मिले संतों से ज्ञान, उससे पहले हो जहाँ पर दंत स्नान, या दंत स्नान। भाई साहब नहीं जलेबी तो पेल दी, लेकिन बात बोले पुदीना सौंठी और लौंग बनाए दांतों को स्ट्रॉन्ग। संगम के तट पर साधु महान टकरा जाए तो कर देना प्रणाम, नागा की टोली प्रयाग के राजा, ठंडी में भूता बचे दांतों से बाजा, मेले में भीड़ मिले संतों से ज्ञान, इससे पहले हो जहाँ पर दंत स्नान, या दंत स्नान। भाई साहब मेले में दांतों की चमक रहे सर्वश्रेष्ठ जब सुरक्षा करे भारत का नंबर 1 आयुर्वेदिक डाबर रेड पे चल चले पत्ती बुझा दे, भाई साहब के दांत भी बहुत चमक रहे हैं, क्या सुंदर है।
Yeah. Um, so with this film, where I want to go with this film is the idea of perspective. That you're given certain situations. you're given, a brand will always come to you with a brief, with a product. And at first you'll find it challenging that, how do I say anything different with it? The trick is that what perspective you see to this. A space like Kumbh could well have been a documentary and just about this, this um, the red paste stall that they had there. But what we decided was, no, we wanted to make it more fun. We wanted to say a lot more about Kumbh. We wanted to make it catchy. We wanted to make it something that people could remember. Um, and that's the perspective we took. We knew we had to go a little desi with it. That's why we got a voice from, I mean, I don't know if you guys could recognize it. This is the voice of this very popular Red FM RJ, who usually does Nand Kishore Bairagi. So that's the voice. And, and he could play because he's somebody from that area. He could play on those words. He could play with the certain lehja we were talking about. And then we were very sure we wanted to keep it light. We wanted to keep it fun because this is a mundane activity, but needed to be done in a fun manner. So that again, so those are things that you've got to decide and you've got to keep to them. Your film has to have that tonality if you want to take the lighter route. If you want to make it sound fun, if you want to make it sound happy, interesting, celebratory. So even like a simple act of brushing becomes a celebration at Kumbh Mela because that's what you do before doing because Dan Snan is what you do before doing Kumbh Snan. So it almost became like, a certain activity that we were offering that needed to be done before you actually go forward for your holy dip. Now, this is something that we did in a light tone. So I'll give you an example of how perspectives change, right? There is something that a brief that we had some time ago from Exide Life. Exide Life was doing something in terms of they wanted to talk about helmet safety, and they wanted to say that we want to tell people as a CSR initiative that it's important to wear helmets. And we saw some of their campaigns that they were doing, and those were simple narratives of yeah, wear a helmet, it's important, etc. Nothing was hard hitting. When it comes to something like wearing a helmet, we thought that what you wanted to, what we wanted to go ahead with was creating the fear of not wearing a helmet. What happens when you don't wear a helmet? And we didn't want to do it through, reconstruction and of events and possibly do in any other way. We wanted to do it through real stories. We wanted people to be shown a mirror that look, this is what you are left with if a simple activity of wearing a helmet is something that you fail to do. This is what your family suffers because the person who goes. This is what is left behind. This is what your family may be left behind with if you choose to possibly not wear a helmet. This again was a perspective thing, so and I'm only talking of some of the successful campaigns. Like when I was talking about Kumbh was something that garnered 8 million views and was perhaps Dabur's one of the most successful campaigns of that year. This again was something, considering it was a CSR activity, this film itself had like 3 million views and plus. And these were, and these worked well for the brands because, brand will always come with a certain idea they have in their mind. They wanted us to be very preachy with this Exide Life campaign about helmets. They wanted to say that, no, we want you to keep harping on the fact that, oh, it's very important to wear helmets, etc. But we all hear, right? All of us know we want that it's important to wear helmets. Has it ever hit us that bad? I'm going to just, Bubbly, we'll just play like 10 seconds and, if anyone wants to watch it, we can later share the links. So I'll just show you the initial 10 seconds of this.
Hello,
video.
yeah. Hello, check, Narayan.
Is it not opening the link? It should be a Facebook link, I'm guessing.
I'm clicking on. Yeah.
Okay. No, let it be. Let it be. I can possibly then share it later. Yeah, so I'll just tell you what we did with it. We actually opened this film with the time when these two parents who've lost their son, who's there in this picture, are showing me this picture or this album that they have, because I was interviewing them. And they're talking about all the times when they spent, like they say, this is when we left him at the hostel. This is what he used to do. He didn't like getting pictures clicked with me. And then they come to this particular picture, which is a thumbnail here, and then say, this is our last family photograph. uh, and then you take off from there, and by this time you've already felt the hollowness that the family is feeling through your shots, and just how the camera moves around the house, just how they show the lady going into this her son's room every day, and the kind of emptiness she feels there, doing nothing, because nothing changes in that room, just her going around, walking, standing on different parts of the room. That's the only movement that the house has. It's all stand still. There is nothing else happening. So again, the perspective to the camera, uh, how you're showing that hollowness that lady is talking about, um, how and how that hits, because essentially when you're talking about storytelling, and especially a lot of times when we're doing nonfiction, because I do a lot of nonfiction. What you're essentially trying to do is that I go to this location, I know what my character is feeling, and I know how I want the script to be like. Now my job here becomes, how do I translate it into a film that you watching feel the same emotion that I did while I was there. That's what the art is about, right? What you feel, what you or how you feel when you conceive an idea. How through techniques can you actually translate that into the same emotion in your audience's mind? That would be the job done. So in this film, like I said, we wanted to take the perspective of fear. We wanted to take the perspective of what your families are left behind with, how that feels, and we did this with the real life, with the real family. So I mean, even shooting then kind of becomes very challenging, because you're actually opening the wounds of somebody, right? But you have to do it in a way that they feel and you feel right about it. Uh, and then you're kind of connecting it with the brand. That's why you have to be very cautious as somebody who's out there directing or taking the creative lead of a project. You have to be very conscious of the fact that, am I being true to the story that I'm trying to say? Would talking a lot about brands, and that's where you have to be a lawyer with the brand. We have such instances 100 times on a day when we are sitting there to justify why we want to do what we want to do, why we want to take this stand in the film. Because the brand would always want to push this forward. But you're the creative mind, you are the creator, you are trained to tell stories. So, how do you say this story in a way so that the brand understand that my purpose is fulfilled, yet you still have a story that clicks well with the audience? That's where the job is. So, I think I could sometime later share. Another thing on perspective, there is something that we did. And I'm telling you this because, most of this is branded content, except for the one that I'm just going to show you. This is something that we've done on for times now for Zoom TV. Uh, there was a series we were doing for 10 episodes called Odd Jobs, which was talking about the most odd jobs in India. And one of the episodes was on nude models. Again, a very challenging premise, because, to find them and get them to be in front of the camera was something really, a lot of back end work actually went in there. A lot of trust building went in there, because I am meeting this certain individual for a 4-hour shoot or a 5-hour shoot in a day. How do I bring myself to that level that this individual trusts me to tell the story of his life, the most vulnerable parts of his life? He doesn't know me, we've not met for more than 2 days. Then how does that conversation build up? How do you put yourself as somebody who is harmless to her, who is inquisitive and respectful of who she is? So I actually, like for this particular one, we had 2-3 days of shoots, 2-3 days prior to the shoot. I would meet her regularly. I would just chit chat with her. I would take her to restaurants. We would talk. I went to her home, all of those things, so that she had that trust in me. And then when I took my crew, I was very selective of who were the people I wanted around her, so that she felt safe, so that she didn't feel that, we were there to cause harm to her. And then eventually we had the story. And while, I was actually talking to her, I was very sure of the fact that I didn't want the story to be a sob story of a nude model. I didn't want it to come from that space of a need. I didn't want that choice to be shown as, you know, a choice made in helplessness. I wanted, because she sounded confident about what she did. She was happy and respectful of the job she did. Her family was happy and respectful of what she did. There was no way I would have remolded it into something that was, that was something that could be looked down upon. I thought she was a very strong woman. I thought with the background that she had and whatever she had faced in her life, she had made very strong choices. So I wanted to maintain that perspective in the film. So I don't think we have time to actually show the whole of the film, but if you look at this film, when I'm revealing, so this is again perspective and how it unfolds in a narrative. When I'm revealing her character, when I'm revealing pockets of her character, that, she is a loving wife. She is also a mother. She is a woman who wants to have um, an individual voice of her own. You reveal her in bits and parts. So you see her hands, you see her legs, you see her taking her clothes off through through foregrounds, through people, through canvases. You're not staring blank at her, because then as the narrative is unfolding, she slowly opens up, right? So even in visuals, you see that slowly opening up. You see that you're not being able to look at her directly. And that's the tension that you're building up, that I only see parts of her. I only see her on the sketches. I only see her through other foregrounds and things. And then when she establishes herself as this lady who is strong, who like sits upright in front of this uh, class of students who look at her and sketch her, uh, who literally like look at every part of her body and observe and make it, and she sits there in a long shot, standing strong, and like, and we've given it like a low angle sort of an appeal, so that she rises like this strong woman who's out there naked in the world and not ashamed of it. So this is what perspective does. Um, Perspective in terms of your storyline, in what I choose to talk to her, how I choose to edit what she's telling me, what is the tonality, because the same words can be actually made into a sub narrative, and the same words can actually become a story, a very strong story. So that's about perspective. I think we're a little short on time here. I will move forward. Bublin, I think
Yeah,
these links can possibly be shared with them later if
sure.
they want to take a look. Yeah.
Oh,
Let's talk about building a narrative. Now that we are talking about narrative, right? Uh, Building a narrative. There is something really interesting here. I was reading from this marketer. His name is Max. So he says that, and there's this little piece I was reading where he talks about that, he joins the TV industry and he's working with Discovery, and he doesn't like, but he feels my calling is somewhere else. And one fine day he moves to doing what he does, and now he's a marketer. So, and this is the narrative he built. So somebody who asks him that, um, what was that one moment in your life, when things changed, when you were enlightened that I didn't want to do what I'm doing? So he says, and this is what he says, I've put the quotes there. I'll tell you exactly when it was. I was working on a school for the Discovery, on a shoot for the Discovery Channel, and a part of the set was this carcass of a dead cow. It smelled to high heaven. I was a lowly production assistant, so after the filming was over, it was my job to ride in a van with this stinky, rotten mass of flesh. Wasps filled the air, and I could barely breathe. That's when I said to myself, maybe this is not going to work out, right? So we don't know who Max is. It's possibly we just know him through these 5 sentences that I shared. But these 5 sentences now make us have a certain idea of who Max is, right? What is that idea? Probably let's move on to the next slide. And this is like an experiment that was done, and I want to actually take you through this experiment so you get the sense of what narrative does. So a lot of people who heard this actually said, and who, like you and I didn't know Max, said that I feel like I can trust him more. Somebody said that I know that Max is someone who's not afraid to change course when things truly aren't working. He's not somebody who just gave up. Somebody said, I can't explain it, but he seems more creative now. Had Max just said, no, I just didn't like it in Discovery and I moved? Are these the things we could have understood about Max? Are these the things we could have perceived about his character, his nature? No, right? Um, so that is what the essential part of your narrative is. Your narrative, when you're telling a story, you're always making this choice between two narrative modes. One is a scene, one is a summary. Max saying here whatever he said is a summary. And Max could have said, I didn't like being in Discovery, so I left. That would have uh, that would have been a summary. What's here is a scene. Another example of this would be, saying, I took the cold keys out of my pocket, pressed the automatic unlock button, heard the door snap open. What is this? It's a scene. You can visualize, think of everything that's happening. Versus somebody saying, I drove to work. That is what essentially the narrative of your storytelling is. And this is very important, especially when you're pitching to brands. When you're out with an idea to pitch it to somebody, how articulate, how detailed can you be about the things you want to say? Even in visualizing your narrative, even in the films that you're making. Let's say, just take an example of, and these are things like I would do as a child, being just more observant. There is, let's say, a plant, all of you are home, perhaps some of you must be like growing plants and all. There is a plant you've grown and it just gets its first flower. Notice how you look at that flower, how you hold that flower, how you talk about that plant you've just grown to somebody else. There is going to be a difference versus a plant you get from a flower shop, a flower you get from a flower shop. There is, so, same kind of situations, but the detailing of how you talk, how you hold, how you say, what is the movement in the body, what is the perspective. Those are the things that make your story get alive. And these are the things which are very important for brand storytelling, because ultimately what you're talking the story of the customer. You're talking to the people and about them, right? And you're just bringing in your product into their life by saying that, hey, this is your life, but this is how my product is significant here. So now what we're going to do is we're going to be looking at, and this is, I'm completely giving you now a very industry perspective of how brand storytelling really works. What are the steps to it? Usually, the first thing that happens is you get a brief from a brand, right? So who are the people making brand stories right now? There are production houses, there are media agencies in the middle. These are the people who are in touch with, there are agencies that in touch with the clients who give them certain briefs, and then the agencies kind of make a strategy around that and look out for for production houses that build the same. A lot of media agencies actually have their own production houses as well. So what usually happens is, let's say, and we'll go example wise for this so that you get a sense of what I'm trying to say. There is a brief that comes, okay? Let's pick up Father's Day. Father's Day is something that's happening next month around the 21st of June. So you get a brief from a client. My client says that, okay, Father's Day is coming up next month. I want to do a small digital film. And yeah, and I want to just possibly celebrate fatherhood at this point, in terms that, fathers are in the houses. That I want to see that side of it. Obviously, it's a brand. It would just, and I want to talk about how significant my health insurance plan is in the middle of all this. Because let's be real, brands are like that, right? A health insurance brand will come up to you and say, give me a nice Father's Day story. And I am a health insurance brand. I need to be significant in the middle of all this. Okay, so you get this brand. Now, what is your first step to this? You've understood there is a lot of times, your budget allocation also comes with it, that this is the bracket, so that you can think of, oh, do I need to think something really premium? Do I need to move this into a certain different format space, etc.? the first few questions you need to ask, if they've not been answered already, is get a sense, if it's a new brand, right? Get a sense of the brand tonality. Like we said, right? We know how a Pepsi is different than a Coke. We know how a Surf Excel is different than an Ariel. The values, what we had just discussed. So, what are the brand values? What are the things that they stand for? These are the first things you need to understand. Is this a progressive brand? Is this a regressive brand? Is this a brand that doesn't like to take stand but just say things? Is this a brand that likes to talk about people a lot? Does this give is this brand very solution oriented in what it wants to say? Those are the kind of questions. Okay, what they stand for, what are the values? Next question: who is this brand talking to? Is a health insurance brand talking to a 15-year-old guy? No, not at all. Is a health insurance brand talking to a 35-year-old housewife? Perhaps not. Then who is it talking to? Ask those questions, or try to answer them in your own head before you move on to an idea. It's perhaps talking to. It's obviously talking to fathers. It's obviously talking to fathers with families who can buy family insurances, right? So you have one bracket set. Maybe fathers between the age of 30 to 55, 60 or above who take health insurances every day. So you get one slot. Could it be talking to anyone else? Uh, Perhaps a health insurance brand can also now talk to a 25, 26-year-old person who has begun earning and can take care of the health insurance of his father or the health insurance of his own family. Then you have another target audience there that, these are the two people who will be buying health insurances: younger parent, the father, and the kids who are now earning. So that's you've got your answers here. Now you move on to insight. What is an insight? Insight, in terms of branded content, insight is the most important part. That is what makes your story work or not work. What is an insight? Insight is this close reading of your consumer, close reading of what firstly, who they are, what their aspirations are, what they do, what they think, what is their problem, how are they seeking solutions to that problem. Do I fit in anywhere in the middle of all this? Do I fit in a story that they're living every day? So let's say for Father's Day, this health insurance brand, okay? We have insights now. Now let's see what are the kind of insights we have. Our first insight is that, in the last 2 months, it's happened for the first time that fathers are actually at home and children are getting to see their fathers beyond, beyond the early morning and the late night hours. They're getting to see for the first time what their fathers do in the afternoon. Do fathers like to take afternoon naps? Does my dad like movies? What is he doing? Is he health conscious? What does he do? Those are the answers a lot of us must have found when our fathers actually stayed back this time at home and we saw them, in a more in a more close manner than ever before. That is one of the insights. The second insight could be that, hey, yaar, I'm away from my parents for the first time, and I am realizing that, oh my God, health is such an important thing, and my father has been taking up all the responsibilities of the house. I am also somebody who's earning. Should it be my responsibility now to at least take care of this small thing of paying a health insurance every year for him? That is also an insight because your consumer is also thinking that. So let's say a lot of youngsters actually move to taking health insurances for their mom and dad. A lot of fathers, because they spent so much time at home, realized that family was so much more, or it was so much more important to actually stay with them and feel these little moments of happiness. So these are the kind of insights that you build on. Okay. One insight could be that, and this is actually something really that, and this is how you bring in insights which make you think a little differently. We are all people who love these watching these baby fail kind of videos, right? And you just and dads are often, like, if you see, like, dads are often the saviors. You have like some million views on videos where dad is saving a baby from a certain kind of a fail and all of this. uh Baby fail is your insight that people are watching a lot of baby fail videos, and you have to bring in the father element to it. Okay. And So these are the kind of insights. Now we're talking about 3 different insights we have here. Now let's see how we move that into a concept. Uh, the insight, what it really requires at an everyday basis, is empathy. You will feel your consumer when you're actually empathizing with them, when you're looking at their situation and thinking, oh yeah, this is me. When you, even if you do not belong to that certain strata of society, you do not belong to that certain target audience, but you need to really feel your audience. You need to really think what they're thinking. You really need to be a part of their aspiration, their failures, their choices. That is when you get into that fold of telling, of putting your brand in that space. So insight becomes very important. Now I have insights of fathers are having fun time at home with their kids. I have insight of my father is getting old and is away. Um I perhaps also have insight about my father has just retired. Fathers. So there was an interesting insight because I was lately working on something like this. An interesting insight I found that that men, when get retired, because of the kind of life we have in India, which is a very run of the mill life, they're only finishing up responsibilities and all of that. Suddenly, when they retire, there is a lull because the children have grown up and are independent. And studies show that there is a that they actually, within 2 years of getting retired, they actually have diseases that they never had before. They have anxiety, depression, the mental health takes backseat. So that is an insight, right? Now, how do I build on that insight? Now comes that, which is where the concept comes in. Now I know that these are the truths of society. These are the truths of my consumers. How am I building a story around these truths? So now you bring in the concept. The concept also has the value of your brand. How is my brand going to be coming in here? So let's say we have a thought of the first idea that we were discussing, or the first insight of fathers are at home and having a good time with kids. So now you add to this thought and you say that your concept becomes that maybe you are going to be showing the great moments the fathers are having with their kids at home, and you're going to be building on you know and you're going to be building on these amazing moments that when you were home made your made your family not feel worried at all, even in the most worried times, because you were there. You made it easy. Your presence made it easy. That's why that's such fun time in the family happened. That is your concept, okay? Uh, so to safeguard these moments forever, by your a health insurance, you kind of slip in the idea of health insurance there, that safeguard these moments forever with XYZ health insurance. That is how your concept comes into play. With somebody like, where you're talking about maybe it's time for the kids to take care of their fathers. You play on the concept of something like, fathers say so many things to us when we are growing up. Is it, they ask us things like, why don't you do this in routine? Or why don't you do this for an hour? Is it the time to ask my dad the same questions which he asked me as a child? Um, so that becomes your concept, right? Baby fail videos that we were talking about. There are baby fail videos. Okay, amazing. They look great. How do I add a concept to it? Maybe I think that, okay, babies always do things which make them fail, or babies don't always know how to take a right decision, but you do. So suddenly you bring in the important significance of a father in that child's life who's doing all of those baby fails. And then they say, you know the right decision. You're responsible. And then, so that becomes your concept. And the right decision could be, which is where your product comes in. Your right decision is my brand. Your right decision is getting a health insurance. So this is how you plant a product in between the life of your customer. Then you move on to the treatment. Now, these treatments could be considering, I mean, I'm going to get into how we're talking about COVID now. Considering you're getting into this COVID situation where you're not being able to shoot, a lot of authenticity in films have come in now, right? Most of the digital films, you see so many people actually shooting their own home videos and sending out. A lot of brands are actually compiling all of this and sending. So your treatments could be user generated videos. It could be a 2D video. It could be poetry with photographs and stock shots. Then you select how you want to communicate this idea, how I want to communicate this idea about I have to ask my dad the same questions that he asked me. Do I do it through photographs of children and father, and move that into, fathers getting older and children noticing? So that is where you need to figure, can this be done in a simple 2D animation? So these are the things you have to think. Then you move on to the script. So there is one stage usually when you send in your insight, concept, and treatment to the client. You get a feedback on the same. They say which, if there are ideas they like, something that works for them. Usually at this stage, you send a treatment reference, which is any other film that you have seen, or anything that is close to what you're thinking. There are a lot of times that is not. So you just have to write a treatment note more properly so that they can understand what you're trying to say. And then when you kind of have a structure and approval on that, you move on to the script stage, wherein you bring in your dialogues, you bring in the kind of narrative you want, you bring in, and you move that into an audiovisual format, wherein you're writing the audio and visual in the script, where you're figuring out your shots and so on and so forth. The rest of the process is like the usual film process. So yeah. So this is the usual process you follow, right? You get approval at every stage and you keep moving forward. After the script is approved, there is a whole pre-production deck that goes, which it's a complete PowerPoint sort of a presentation where you have everything from why this idea to what your concept is to why that works to what every line is going to look like. Often you have storyboards with it, which you get sketched, or if you're not storyboards, you have mood boards with it, which are essentially pictures which are somewhere close in terms of mood to what you want to shoot. All of that goes, so everything is one set on paper, is then when you move on to shooting of the same. Moving on to the three bond. Now, so this is what the process is, right? Now, after that, we'll talk about what are the three essential things that you need to remember when you're talking about brand storytelling. First is, and I'll quickly give you examples because I feel you must have possibly seen these things. Now, there are 100 lot of brands there, right? Everyone is saying something or the other. I think on everyday basis, around 50 different films get released. How are you being different? And the answer lies in your insight. The answer lies in how you marry the insight with your concept. What is it that you're observing about people? Like imagine the Axis Bank video that we saw. It's such an interesting insight that mothers love the kid's name so much that they make it their password. Very interesting insight, right? So these are the kind of insights that you need to find. And how that happens is when you're very observant about every kind of person you meet and see how are they different. Because see, you may have, as a storyteller who's not working for brands, you may have a choice of, I like these kind of films, so I'm only going to be talking or be around certain kind of people. But when you're talking brand stories, most of the time your content is going out to the world. You are not deciding, but they are deciding if they have to see this. So you have to make it for them. To make it for them, you need to know them. To need to know them, you need to observe them. So even if it is, a woman who likes to really dress up quite a lot, but and doesn't quite understand and is not great at expressing herself, is just as important as someone else who is a great athlete and has 100 stories to tell about himself. So every character is important. Now, in a sea of sameness, be unforgettable. That is one of your mantras. Now, I'll give you some examples. If you remember, last year, there was a film that had been done by HP, which was on Maki Diwali. Now, again, a very interesting insight. Simple thing that you have so many diya sellers around the house. I'm not sure if you guys remember the film. I mean, if you do, it'll be great if you can hear. Otherwise, we could just play this film for you all. So this film was essentially about this diya sellers who you have, right before Diwali, on the road, sitting on the sides, and how nobody really pays attention because we are more prone to buying diyas from shops and showrooms, etc. So this insight is where, and then they do this and they bring in the idea of this innocence of this child who looks at this woman, and that is the insight. And then from there, it just becomes this very interesting ad. I am not sure if any of you is saying anything. Okay. So yeah, so and something like a policy bazaar ad, if I'm not wrong, yeah, where you have this guy who is this deaf guy in the wedding of his father. He's a dumb guy in the wedding of his dad of his brother, talking about how his brother made him what he is. Really, I mean, you're talking about policy bazaar or something which has nothing to do with that space, but just how that insight of uh, this brotherhood is something that they escalate into such a big narrative. Or All Out ad, if you remember, of the time. So All Out also played on a very interesting insight at that point. If you remember that ad, which is this dining table ad of this mother scolding this little baby, and everyone in the family is very against the mother, that she's being so strict with the child, and then the father of the family, the grandfather of the family, actually stands up and says, no, no, what she's doing is right. He's stolen the 10 rupee note, and she has all the right to be strict. The insight was that women in India were very scared of being strict mothers. 75% in people in India thought that strict mothers were not really a good thing. Mothers needed to be soft, they needed to be empathetic and nice and all of that, and not be harsh on their kids when there was a need to be. So All Out actually took a spin on that and went ahead and said that, it's good to be strong for the right things to happen, and connected that emotion to their brand, because All Out is strong on the mosquitoes. So again, how do you try to build this, right? So that is one of the things, that what insight you pick up and how you kind of build your brand narrative around it, that you become somebody who is unforgettable. And these are all the ads you remember. Most of the times, perhaps you guys may not even remember what these brands were, but you would remember when I'm talking stories. Second thing that you need to be very cautious of is the fact that more than customers, you need to build a tribe. Somebody who does it very beautifully is Red Bull, is Levi's, is Royal Enfield. They have communities of followers, who stand by the value of these brands, who are what these brands are. So Levi's has done some series right now. Again, I mean, I'm not sure if I can really play this because I think they're running short on time, but I think you guys can access this and take a look. Levi's has come up with this certain campaign right now, which is completely on pride, and they have taken icons, who stand, who are from the LGBTQ community. So yeah, Bablin, I just saw your message. I think we'll be opening for questions very soon. Yeah, so bring up icons who stand for your value, so that your values actually bring together a tribe that goes with you. And we're talking about, and the third mantra is that be profitable and be human. What we're essentially saying is that when you're talking to people, talk in a way that through your stories that you're doing something human, like the way I gave you the examples of Microsoft and Apple. They work for us not because, also, I mean, sure, because of the product, but also because of how there is trust in how they speak, in just the kind of innovation Apple shows in its own ads. um, when you're human, you on your own, you solve the idea of people connecting and trusting you for the same. So essentially, these are the three things that you need to be really mindful of when you're really making a brand narrative. Quickly looking at the formats that you have when you're making things for brands. One, of course, is your live shot. The others are GFX, 2D motions. Let's quickly look at these kind of formats. So live shot videos are Bubbly. We'll quickly go through the kind of format so that they get a sense of every format. Yeah. Live short videos, most of the videos that you see, they're shoot-based videos. They can be fiction or non-fiction, accompanied by, a song, poetry, dialogue, voiceover led. They require a larger crew. There is an average turnaround of 20 days to 60 days from the point you start with the brief to the time you deliver the master. In terms of the budgets, well, these are the most high budgeted sort of films where you have to consider money for the cast, set, crew, equipment, edit, music, recce, rehearsals. The policy bazaar ad that I was talking about is here in the thumbnail on the top. So if you want to take a look, or if you've forgotten, I think you'd remember this. Creative benefits obviously are there's the most authentic, emotive, most expressive kind of videos where you can recreate exactly what you want to see, right? Moving on to GFX videos, but sadly, given the current situation right now, this is something that is not working as much. Moving on to GFX videos, which is one of the formats which is really interesting. You use pictures, cinemagraphs, or stock footage for the same, with text or voiceover on it. It requires lesser crew, obviously. It's mostly people on the edit table and the creative. Average turnaround time would be around 2 weeks. There is Surf Excel has done something really similar on this ground, which is a cinemagraph lately. And yeah, you guys should take a look at it. It's an interesting film that they've done, which is just using pictures, because now you're not shooting. So how do you really communicate? So, they use pictures, they bring in voiceover, they bring in text to say what they want to say. Moving on to 2D videos. This is a hit with brands. Every brand wants to do a 2D video somewhere or the other, because a lot of the times brands are actually talking about, especially BFSI brands, right, which are talking mostly your banks and finance. They have, or phones for that matter, a lot of unboxing, a lot of, oh, this app has come in, a lot of explainer videos to do. This format works very well out there. So you can have a character animation, you can have vector. Like, this is something that brands are doing at every possible day in bulk. Here, obviously, you need a motion graphics artist, you need an animator, you obviously need a script and a director for the same, who can conceptualize and put this together. It's faster. This is something that's really working ever since COVID has hit, because you don't really have to move around too much for it, and you can just think things and do it, right? So this is one of the formats. That's really working. 3D videos, something very popular with whenever a new gadget launch happens, be it a phone, like something like, these are all videos, guys. So if you want to later possibly see them, you could take a look. Mostly gadget videos are all. So most of the Apple ads or MI or Vivo ads or Xiaomi ads you see are all 3D videos. There are also obviously 3D cartoons and things like that, but mostly in the brand space, 3D works very well when you're recreating gadget specifications, insides of a processor, etc. This is obviously a little more expensive, because you need a sketch artist, you need an animator, you need a 3D artist, you need a voiceover, edit, and music, all of that put together. Creative benefits, obviously, it adds a dimension to what you're seeing. It's closer to reality. So something like for something like gadgets, for something like things that you can't really shoot, how a processor works, how micro things work. Something like this in a 3-dimension space really works well. Then something really popular these days is user-generated content. If you go onto the pages of Oreo, Maggie, and like, you name the brand and they've done it. Mother Dairy, they've all done user-generated content. So what they're usually doing is, asking their users to shoot at home. Even we've also been actually shooting quite a lot of videos where we're getting users to give us footage of what they're doing, what's happening, and putting that together. This is a very popular format right now. It's very authentic. It's just giving a new, interesting dimension to things. This one particular one that I've put here is a Nivea ad. So yeah, this is something that's very popular. People are really connecting with their audience with things like this. And moving it into, different kind of stories. Somebody's talking about having a good time. Somebody's talking about, hey, it's time to sit down and have conversations. Somebody's talking about, oh, this time we'll go preserve it. Somebody's talking about, I learned so much about my family being together. So just different takes on same situations. And then you have very interesting format that's coming in, which is playable ads. This one is particularly something that I would like you to watch when you go back. It's very interactive. Ever since, I think, Netflix Bandersnatch came in, brands started thinking about how you could get interactive with your audience. And yeah, this one turned out to be a very interesting one. So what people are doing is, this particular Samsung ad is actually an interactive ad where you can choose where you want to take forward the story. And it moves you, and it's an Instagram ad. So you actually move this from one story page to another, and the narrative moves forward. And Samsung is very seamlessly integrated here. Next one that you have is AR production. AR production which is augmented reality, is very popular. It's gaining. Like these are the formats which are coming up because 2D live shoot, all of that was there. Brands are opening up to these new possibilities of these new concepts that are coming in. Augmented reality is obviously something that takes time. We have companies in India who are working around augmented reality, who are making a simple example of this would be, the Facebook and Snapchat filters that you use. Brands are getting into that space. So if you see, there is this Alive Now, this organization in Bangalore that does this for Facebook. And, you have brands like Flipkart where you can actually they've created filters where you can try your lipstick shades before buying them. Something like a chocolate eclair where you can shoot the bomb bursting on your head the way they usually have in the ads that are running. So this is again another kind of storytelling where you bring in your audience to be participative in the story you want to say. These are some interesting kind of stories that we have. Storytelling. Now, one thing that's very important, and I want to tell you this and leave you with this thought because this is where we are in the field of storytelling at this point. Storytelling right now for brands is going through a major shift in terms of how you want to say things. There is a major issue, and because you're so open to consumer response at this point. It's not like 10 years or 12 years ago that you put out an ad and you just were happy about the TRPs. You get criticized if you go a step wrong. So at this point, brands are very cautious of the fact that they need to be with the audience. They need to empathize with the audience. They need to hold the audience by the hand and show them the optimistic side. They Instead of saying that, oh, now you're at a problem, there is a pandemic here, this is what my product is to save you from it. This is one narrative that we are actually fighting with brands for, that this is not how it needs to be communicated to the audience at this point. Empathy is the need of the hour. Brands have to be very careful of what they are saying. They need to acknowledge the disruption. Actually, acknowledging disruption was something that was still happening last month when COVID was new. Now we've moved on to a stage where the brand narratives are changing into, hey, now we are moving on to the new normal. How are things changing around the same? What are we doing differently? How are you opening up to the new normal? Be more optimistic about what's coming your way, because this is what it is. What now? Second thing that needs to be very important at this point about brands is you need to be yourself. So lead with empathy. When I say Nike has done this beautiful ad, and again, I mean, we're really short on time, so I would like you guys to see it. So Nike is usually talking about, find your greatness, or getting out, exploring, being an athlete, running, all of that. This time they're saying that in this particular ad that even in staying indoors, you're a champion. And what they're showing is that, all of these people are actually working out in their homes. They're doing whatever they're doing in their houses. And this is a user generated content video, but very beautifully, the value presented is done so beautifully. Second thing is be yourself. Even though the times are tough right now, you need to still stick to what you have always been for people, right? If your brand, now, what we need to think right now in terms of brand storytelling is, if my brand was a person at this point, what would it say to my consumer? Would it say that, oh no, you need to, use my product? Or would it say that, hey, I feel you, but this is what is there? So what a lot of brands are doing very interestingly at this point are, they are giving a spin to something that you know them for. Asian Paints is something that we've always known as Har Ghar Kuch Kehta Hai, right? So taking on that phrase of Har Ghar Kuch Kehta Hai, they have actually rephrased it into this very beautiful ad where they're talking about Har Ghar Chupchap Se Ye Kehta Hai कि आजकल अंदर बहुत आजकल कोई अंदर बहुत रहता है, and then they actually build on to talk about and I'm sure you must have, these were one of the first few ads that had come in when COVID hit. So very beautifully, again, on a already established narrative, they adapt to the situation and they celebrate people living inside the house. The second, they've done two films. The second film actually talks about how you are beautifying the house now that you're inside. You're cleaning corners. you are looking at, oh, this mirror has not been cleaned for so many years or whatsoever. So the house is actually talking those things. So again, giving you a positive feel to life at this point. Third thing is, through your communication in times of COVID, how do you add value to your customer's life? Uh, at this point, your customer is already feeling the hit of the pandemic. He's at home, perhaps at a pay cut, already are surrounded by a lot of problems. As a brand, how do you still communicate with your consumer? Do you show support? Do you give a tool to help your consumer thrive in a new reality? How are you doing that through your story? Something that Dettol did very interestingly at this point was, and Dettol and Lifebuoy actually both. Dettol, comes up with, just gives you this thought about, oh, if I wash my hands, this is what happens to the kitanu around me. So they run away. There is this small ad they've done with the kids, that the kid puts his finger on the soap and then puts it inside, and all the dust just goes away, and he realizes that, oh, this. Lifebuoy has given you 20 seconds of hand washing is important. Lifebuoy comes up with a 20-second song that you can sing while washing your hands. So Vivo comes up with something, who talks about the frontline workers, and in the end says that, oh, we're going to give some part of it to help them. So, what are the things? How are you bringing solution to people through your stories at this point? Because selling is obviously not what your consumer is looking at. Your consumer is looking at empathy. Your consumer is looking at deriving a story of strength at this point. So storytelling that way has gone quite a lot of change for brands at this point in terms of how you're talking to your consumer. I think we should open up to questions now, and I could just pick.
Right. I'm stopping sharing my screen.
Yeah.
Yes. We are open to questions now. So many things to think about. And I will share all these links with all the students and all the participants. You can look the ads, you can go through the points, those which we could not watch here, which Mrigashree just talked about. So you can go through those links.
Hi, Bableen ma'am. This is Preksha. Can I go ahead with my question?
Sure, go ahead.
Hi, ma'am. First of all, thanks a lot for the wonderful presentation and the insightful discussion. So, I wanted to ask you. This is Preksha. I am a third year student at the Department for Journalism, and I wanted to ask you that when you talk about this shift in advertising or storytelling from telling selling the brand to selling a story, in all these examples you said, why do you think that this kind of a transition was required, and what triggered this in the industry?
You're talking about in terms of COVID or in terms of how storytelling has changed over the years?
The general, like at one point in time, I'm sure as we're talking, there are a lot of ads that we see now. Sorry, selling stories. So I just mean from the start, not COVID.
Okay. So, see, a lot of things had a role to play here. Earlier, when we were talking about something like the early 90s, the first and the most primary thing was that your platforms for consuming this content became a lot more wide. Earlier, brands had a simple way of buying a certain slot with a channel, getting a 30-second or a 1-minute slot, and saying their story there. There was no other means of communication apart from the print ads. There was no other means of audio-visual storytelling. With the coming in of the internet, brands had that freedom to build their own pages, to get a direct following of customers and consumers, and and not be actually limited to certain time frames or certain ads that they could make. Usually, when it was the early 90s, a brand would only be possibly making 2 or 1 commercial film a year, and that is all that would be there, 1 or 2 commercial films, and 30 seconders or a minuter, and that was the only communication you heard from them. Whereas now, every topical day, every topical opportunity, be it your Independence Day to your Father's Day, the brand has a platform to communicate and a story to say, and a wide range of audience to be actually looking and responding to it in a much more bigger manner. So that in itself has changed the way story needs to be told. An Axis Bank or a Surf Excel can't go on saying that, buy my detergent because whatever, I have added this new certain element to it. It needs to be in it needs to be recalled by the customer through the stories it's saying. Because now because this customer is consuming a lot of other content on everyday basis. Just think of the amount of ads you watch, or think of the amount of videos you watch on your Facebook, Instagram, or otherwise. So when you're consuming so much, somebody telling you that buy this is not going to work with you. Your audience is more intelligent, your audience is more interactive. What's going to work with them is how you make them feel, for that 1 minute that you have through your storytelling, or maybe more, because when you're talking digital, you can actually just go on. But you have a minute now because, as audience, we have a very small attention span. So we'll move on if it doesn't hit well with us. So that's why the storytelling has kind of completely moved, because to hold the audience with different kind of stories has become more important, because that will increase your brand visibility. That will make them remember you. Their platforms are a lot more open. So saying the same thing is not going to work. That's why you've got to find different ways of talking to people so that they remember you.
Thank you so much for the response, ma'am.
Thank you, Mrigashree. So, what are there more questions about the art of storytelling, about what you thought through, what you felt while listening to the examples shared by Mrigashree?
Yeah, ma'am, I have a question here, Jagrati this side.
Yes, Jagrati.
Ma'am, whatever we have discussed up till now, we were talking about stories with the products that are associated with the consumer, which we are directly consuming. So if suppose a person belongs to an industry which is a producing industry, for suppose if I state here, the advertising agency wants to portray story, so how would that person do that when the thing is not directly consumed by the producer?
Okay. No, so see, what we need to think of is that everything that has a manufacturing unit or a business here is present because there is somebody who is consuming it directly or indirectly somewhere around, right? If there is, let's say we have companies, like there are companies that we work for, something like a Cane. Cane is a company that deals in oils. They take oils out from the oil refineries and things like that. Uh, and there are times that we've got to work for companies like that, which we generally don't really associate with, because this is not like edible food oil that we're talking, but things that we don't directly consume. Now, what you have to see is how the importance, the presence of that certain company is making a difference to your consumer's life. Is this for the kind of employment it's giving to the people? That becomes one of the stories. Is this because the oil is produced and it gets onto your vehicles, and today you're being able to have this journey because somewhere many seas away there is some person who's ensuring that the certain machinery is working fine in the Cane company. So you have to find those connections, even though you've got to, because what you need to understand, like I said, is that every company exists for a reason. It connects to the consumer indirectly somewhere or the other. That's the thread you need to find, through connections, through a certain storyline, and then you need to connect to it.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Right. So, are there more questions on the minds of the participants?
Yes, good evening, ma'am. Manaswini here.
Yes, Manaswini.
Ma'am, I wanted to ask you, like, so since everything is, rapidly changing, how does the future of what does the future of the industry looks like right now? Like, for us, like, we are now in our final year, and like, if have we are looking forward to go into the field of ad and PR, what should we keep in our mind right now while going into that field?
I think so. See, even though we are facing a pandemic and there are people are going through crisis, but nobody wants to not hear a story. I think the thought of storytelling will always go on. In fact, as we are indoors, we're consuming more stories than ever. In terms of where the future of advertising and filmmaking is, um, it's challenging at this point because now it's time for us to look at what more can be done. If a 70, 100, 150 people shoot is not possible, it's not like the stories can't be told. Uh, it's challenging for us to figure out how something as impactful can still be made. So we're actually, I mean, this is something I'm personally telling you, that, you know, we are in that lookout of how a story can be told the way it was never told before. Uh, every little element, be it animation to somebody's personal photographs to just creating something that can be done while you're sitting indoors and not getting out. Because, see, working in an agency, I can tell you the work is not less. Brands still want to say a lot of things. In fact, if you follow a few brands, or, you know, you follow, considering you're saying you're a, you know, you want to get into PR, ad PR in future, there are a lot of pages that you have that keep giving you a lot of brand ads out. There are a lot of films getting created in this period, because every brand wants to come forward and say their thing. Every brand has a certain new thing to say. So the work is always, what's going to be interesting now is that a lot of new formats are going to be coming in. Even the shoots go down, you know, augmented reality, augmented reality, interactive kind of. That's why I give you the examples of those kind of formats. You know, interactive storytelling, graphics, 2D and 3D kind of filmmaking, or cinemagraphs, stock. All of this is going to user-generated content. If you actually see right now, there is so much of user-generated content videos out there that brands are putting out. So all of that is pretty much going to be there. Obviously, how we went into COVID is not how we're going to get out of it. There is going to be a new normal. Brands are going to be talking in a different way, and they already are. But the communication is not going to stop. The consumers want to hear stories, and the brands want to put out stories. So I think we are all pretty safe there.
Thank you, ma'am.
You're welcome.
So, as just mentioned by Yuki ma'am, that this webinar will also be uploaded on DCG webinar series. And I'm sure this series of asking questions is not going to stop. We'll have a lot more questions when we look at the advertisements and the stories created by you, Mrigashree. Any last words on all these aspiring storytellers right now when they are at their homes? How can they keep the skills sharp?
Yeah, I think, now that all of you are home and all of you, I'm sure, have your phones with you, what you can really do at this point is, this is a very good time to reflect. This is a very good time to write down ideas, to observe insights. I'm personally telling you, I have not stayed with my family for this long in the last 12, 13 years. And it's for the first time I've come back. And, you know, the kind of insights I am getting, because I belong to a hill station, the kind of conversations here, the kind of people, the neighborhoods are very different. So the kind of conversations you see, the kind of insights you get about a life which is not about run of the mill, you know, it's easier. Observe, and it's just completely different. I'm just seeing a very new perspective to, you know, to how people are living who are not in the cities, how people in small towns really live, how lives in the hills are. So those kind of things, you know, just be very observant to your family discussions, be very observant to just the light that falls on your balcony every day, to how people are in the balconies around your houses. You'll find a certain pattern, you'll find stories. Maybe start shooting little things here and there. Bring forward a narrative. If you're a writer, start writing. A very interesting exercise would be that, you know, if you have 5 brands that you like, um, write, do an exercise and, you know, write for them. You understand that tonality. What if you had to make a film or first of Excel on Father's Day? What would that be like? What kind of things would you want to say? Or just write down insights. I think the best thing that to start with is write down insights. What are the things you're feeling? What are the observations? Read a lot of articles on people, on trends. What are people thinking? What are the studies made on human behavior? Those are the things that lead you to understanding people. that lead you to talking to those people and saying stories about them. Yeah.
Okay. So, thank you so much, Mrigashree. I know you had 1 hour, but somehow when we delve into this world of
Yeah, it
sharing,
just kind of, I got carried away by
but the
the
passion was
stories,
top.
but then, yeah.
It did more than the voice on the other
Hmm.
side. So I would share the links with all, and maybe you can get in touch with ma'am on Facebook and YouTube channel and ask and discuss your questions there. So, on the behalf of the entire department and students, thank you so much for joining us despite low bandwidth. We managed quite well. Thanks a lot, and we hope to have such more brainstorming sessions soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mrigashree, on behalf of the complete department. It was an excellent session. We will upload it on our web series on sorry, not web series, webinar series, and we really want to request you if our students will come up with some questions there on your channel later. If you can take out little time of yours and answer them. If and
Sure,
when
you can.
possible.
Yeah, I would love to, because I feel that this time slot is not enough to actually, talk about something as big as brand marketing, because
We
there are
have
so
given
many
them a
examples,
lot
so
of
many
fuel
case
to think
studies.
about.
Yeah. So I'd be happy responding to any of the questions. I would really recommend that people, that the students look at the videos that we have. It just kind of helps them build perspective of different kind of storytelling that we have in terms of brands. Yeah.
Thank you, Mriga.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrigashree. Okay. Bye bye.